Thank you all for joining us. This is the Deployments and Leading Practices track, and it's my pleasure to introduce Ebony Love from McDonald's for our session today. Over to you.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Identiverse family. My name is Ebony Love, and I'm the current director of cybersecurity service deployments at McDonald's. And it's a fancy way of just saying we get the tools and technology into the hands of our people in order to protect the McDonald's brand where it's needed most. So the journey that I'm going to take you on today started about 2.5 years ago when I was actively supporting the deployment and support for our authentication and authorization services at McDonald's. So we'll just take you on this little journey. So at McDonald's, just to give you a little bit of a background, between McDonald's Corporation and our franchisees, we are supporting about 40,000 restaurants in 116 global markets, and that comes out to about 2 million crew members. Now, if you know anything about the restaurant industry, particularly in the quick service category, the turnover is quite high. So if you think about our scale and just the volume of our business, there's probably a crew member somewhere around the world getting onboarded to McDonald's every minute of every day. Now, when we looked at our identity synchronization process across all of our systems, it was taking about 24 hours for that identity to get created, synchronized, and then distributed to all of our downstream systems. So we're ingesting HR data from literally hundreds of different systems and trying to correlate, consolidate that data, and then push it out to downstream systems such as payroll, training, sanitation, those types of things. So that process was taking about 24 hours. And what we were presented with was kind of a sticky problem in our business, which was that this process is taking a long time. Our infrastructure was having probably monthly outages, which is not a good look in the identity space. And what that was doing was really disrupting our business in the restaurant, which is also not something that you want to make a habit of. So our business partners came to us and said, you know what, we really need you to address this system, get it stable, and we just needed to find a way to get it stable, get the sync time down, and make it a better experience. And if there was just a way to do that, and what we were hearing from our business was to fix your aging infrastructure and reduce the sync time. And I don't know about you, but I love the smell of retiring tech debt in the morning. So our approach to this problem was really we had to look at our identity synchronization system from the ground up. So we looked at what are all these components that are feeding our system. So we got to work kind of taking that system apart and looking at the individual components. And what we found was there was one specific component of our identity sync that was handling jobs in batch. And we had, when we looked across with the infrastructure, we had 2 servers in 2 regions. So it was a total of 4 servers serving all of those 40,000 restaurants and those 2 million crew identities. And those servers were set up in parallel. And with our batch process, what was happening, and you're going to be kind of like, oh gosh, what were they doing? But what was happening is instead of just taking in changes, what we would do is we would actually delete all of the data in the tables and re-ingest that data from every system. And so when you're doing that across the servers, you don't ever want to take a single region down. So you can't delete all the tables across 4 servers at the same time, right? You've got to daisy chain those together so that at least one system or 2 systems, 2 of those servers have data at a time. So that was another challenge. And what we couldn't do, because these jobs, if you're deleting 100 million rows and trying to add those back in, that takes time. And with this daisy chain, we had to stagger the jobs so that they didn't clash, which meant that we had to schedule these jobs, these refreshes, about 12 hours apart so that they never bumped into each other. Now, when we talk about scalability, you can't really scale that because now the more servers that you add in parallel, the more time that you have these daisy-chained jobs going together. So we really had to look at addressing that. We also wanted to think about our data in terms of a golden record. Now, we're ingesting this data from hundreds of these HR systems, and some of these systems have some data about the person, and another system might have another one. And with our downstream systems, the downstream systems from this component, we're looking at is we would create a custom table for every system that was accessing the data. And so building those tables for each system, that was also taking time. So what we really needed to do was think about, if we restructured the data and created kind of a single row, that golden record for each person, then you don't need custom tables for every environment. You just say, come to the table and get the data that you need. Okay, so while we're doing all of this, we also looked at moving from batch to delta processing, and that's really where the magic happens, right? So, being able to do that, what we had to do was go to our upstream systems and make sure that they had a way for us to read changes. And in a couple of cases, we needed to have those upstream systems add a column like date, time, give us a date and a timestamp so that we knew we could actually track what records had changed. Okay, so while we're doing all of this, we really just overhauled the system from the ground up. We actually built a parallel infrastructure because with all of these changes, it required a lot of testing. If you're talking about taking out a major component of your identity synchronization infrastructure, you want to make sure it's actually working properly. So we had to build that as a separate infrastructure and then test all of those components to make sure the reads and the writes and the changes and the deletions were happening appropriately. So we did all that. It took us about not an hour and a half, it took us a year and a half to do that. And it really was, in this process, we're looking at, yes, there's actually a technical solution to fix this. If we can just get the batch processing eliminated, we'll be able to go ahead and take care of everything. Now, in this approach, we've got this single view of the data, and as a result, what we did is we were able to almost triple the size of our infrastructure. So what we originally had, if you remember, we had those 4 servers, 2 in each region running in parallel. What we did is instead, we set up a leader and follower setup with nodes. And in some cases, we did a failover pair +1 or a failover pair +2. And so that model, by using that model, we went from 4 servers serving the company to 14 in our production environment. So you might call that a little oversized for what we were doing, but what we wanted to make sure is that each region, if one region went down, the other region could handle all the traffic for both regions. So we really made sure that we were able to handle incoming, current capacity, future capacity, and make it scalable. So in this model, because we have these leader and follower nodes, if we want to add capacity, we just tack on a new node. So maybe there's a failover pair +3. So that really helped us to get the scalability in place. We did establish that golden record, which enabled us to have a one-to-many view of our data versus a one-to-one with each of our individual applications. And through just that delta processing, we were able to change that sync time from the 12 hours that we were experiencing down to 10 minutes, which is really was a tremendous, tremendous benefit for us. So we're very much celebrating our success here. But what we actually found is that we solved the wrong problem. And you're probably asking yourself, well, wait, no, you told us. You told us the story. They told you, fix the infrastructure. You know, we've been running this system for about a year. We've had 0 outages and 0 critical impacts due to that system. So we solved what we said we were going to solve, right? Well, we were still getting complaints from our operators through our business partners. And we're like, what's going on? We did what you guys asked us to do. So we ended up wanting to go on operator visits. So we asked our business partners, you know what, can you just get us in with a couple of operators? Can we visit a couple of restaurants and actually see what's happening? What's happening with this process as we're onboarding the crew members? So we go to a couple of visits, had breakfast, as we do, and started watching what was happening. And what we learned is that the restaurants actually want to onboard and train their crew during their first shift. And when you look at the hiring process, you know, in the restaurant, we think, okay, on a Wednesday, I hire this person, and on Friday, they start their first shift. Well, in the restaurant, because of the turnover, you actually don't hire the person unless and until they actually show up for training. So it's not until you set eyeballs on that person for their first shift that you go, okay, now I'm going to onboard them to the HR system. Well, if you're waiting until that exact minute, and I should back up a second. So that remember that component went from 12 to 10 minutes, 12 hours to 10 minutes. There's still this overall sync process. There. So that component was 10 minutes. The entire process, we got down from that 24 hours to about 2 to 4 hours to fully synchronize that ID through all of the systems. But if you're talking about training somebody, getting their ID and training them in their first shift, that 2 to 4 hours, that's not good enough, right? If they hit the door, I don't want them sitting at a computer waiting for their ID to sync so they can log on, and give me the rest of their, tax deductions. What I really want them to do is I want them on the grill. I want them learning how to make the fries. I want them learning how to make the coffee and run the ice cream machine and all of those other processes. And I can't do that if they're sitting there at a computer waiting for this ID to sync. So that 2 to 4 hours, well, we were celebrating, on the infrastructure side and the services side, we're celebrating. In the restaurant, it's not good enough. So when you look at it, that identity availability is really just one piece of the onboarding, but it's not necessarily the critical factor of success for the restaurant. And at the end of the day, what we really should have done was questioned our assumptions about the problem that we were actually trying to solve. Now, I'm going to take just a small detour here, because a few months ago, I learned a story about Albert Einstein that I'll share with you, and it's about the theory of relativity. So Einstein, you know this guy, smart guy, genius, cosmologist, right, physicist. He's working on this theory of relativity, and he started out, and this guy, he taught us a lot of what we know about how the universe works today. Now, he's working on this theory of relativity, and he's doing the math. Brilliant guy, but he can't get the math to work, right? He keeps coming out with this strange answer. And one of the assumptions that he had about how the universe worked is that it was a fixed size. And so he's running that through this equation, and he can't get the numbers to work. And so he's really uncomfortable about this, but he's like, I wonder if maybe there's some kind of constant that I'm missing. So he added to his equation this cosmological constant. And once he did that, hey, the numbers work out. It's great. But there's still in the back of his head, I wasn't there, but I'm imagining, back of his head, this really bothers scientists to kind of have to add these random things to their equations to make the numbers work. Now, a few years later, Edward Hubble, you've heard of the guy, Hubble telescope, all of that stuff. He's doing his own research. And what he discovers is that the universe is not actually a fixed size. He can prove that the universe is, in fact, expanding. Now, when Einstein learned about this, he goes, aha. So he goes back to his equation, armed with this new evidence, this new information. He removes the cosmological constant, redoes the calculations based on an expanding universe, and voila, everything works. You don't need this extra piece in there. And so, what this kind of tells us about Einstein is that as brilliant, as he is, even he, kind of made mistakes, right? So as we think about this, I just want to take you through what are some of the lessons that we learned, that we can learn from the story of Einstein and what we learned through our process. So one is make sure the right voices are being heard. We listen to our business partners. And when you work in cybersecurity, I don't know how many of you day to day work with the end users of the technology that you're actually putting out there, right? We're usually, 3 or 4 steps removed from that end user. But in our case, we had an opportunity to really see and go into our restaurants and see how the technology actually gets applied, and that gave us a lot of insights. So yes, you want to listen to your business partner, but if your business partner is not the end user of the technology and the tools that you're putting out, you might want to explore, are there other people or other situations, other use cases that I need to take into account in order to validate my project? Also, simple solutions can often be better than more complex ones. If you look at the equation that was being worked on for the theory of relativity, right? You don't need all this extra stuff to work out. And so if we'd really gone back and looked at, this actually isn't a technology problem, this is a business process problem, right? Could we have had an impact on those restaurants much sooner? Now, that's not to say that retiring the tech debt wasn't necessary. It absolutely was. This was not something that was going to continue to function well as we kept going. So did we need to replace the servers? Absolutely. Did we benefit from that redesign and getting the, moving away from the batch processing to the delta processing? Absolutely. That was absolutely necessary. But if we'd been able to explore that one process change of, hey, can you guys maybe request the ID the night before? Maybe HR, maybe there's a process change where you can maybe not ding the restaurant for turnover if they onboard someone and that person doesn't show up for their first shift. Maybe there's a process change there or some metrics that you can look at that would help. And that could have been a stopgap for solving that sticky problem in the restaurant of onboarding and training at the first shift while we work on the infrastructure component, right? Always ask, are we solving the right problem? That's something that, when we got our hands on it, it was a technology problem, absolutely. The system's breaking, well, we're gonna break it less, right? So that's, that worked out for us. You also want to make sure you're validating the measures of success, right? Don't break it so much, gotcha. It doesn't anymore, right? But if we looked at what the true value was, I want to be able to train in how many restaurants can I train at the first shift, that metric would have still been 0, right? So if we had the right metric and we were looking at that, we might have come to a different solution. So make sure up front that you're validating, well, how are we actually measuring success for this so that everyone is aligned and clear. And then always consider, at the end of the day, yes, we're deploying technology, and technology is important, but it's a means to an end, and what we're really trying to do is enable people, right? We're enabling people through the technology, and the technology is never a substitute for a bad process, no matter how much you improve it. And just don't miss the why behind the what. If you hear, don't break it, okay, I won't break it. But if you hear something else that's like more valuable to the business, like why are we actually undertaking this? What is the purpose of this? And even when you're looking at, Einstein's, theory of relativity, what was the purpose, of this? And just going back to questioning your assumptions. And so what I'll leave you with today is as you go back, to your jobs, to your functions, to your deployments, think about as smart and as intelligent as Einstein was, he still had errors in reasoning. And so as you go back to your job, just remember, at the end of the day, you're no Einstein. Okay, all right. Thank you so much, and I will stop here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ebony. That was great. We've got time for questions from the audience. And yes, absolutely. Put your hands up. I will circle around with the mic. I'll come to you next.
Thank you. Really appreciated the dynamic talk. And I think you've left us at the edge of our seats, though. It seems like you're still a few hours too long. So what happened?
Oh, so what happened? Well, that is actually another story. And if I get invited back, maybe I'll tell you about it. The suspense will kill you for the next year, right?
Thank you. I was actually going to ask, are you based in Chicago?
Yes.
I used to live in Chicago for a few years. I was going to ask what your favorite global restaurant menu item was, because they have like the rotating selection.
Oh, yes. So this is one thing. So we're headquartered in downtown Chicago. And one of the greatest features that I love about our building is that one of our franchisees runs a restaurant in the lobby of the building. And at that restaurant, what they do is they select menu items from around the world on a rotating basis. So every couple of months, we get 3 or 4 different menu items to try from around the world. So I'll tell you, the first week that I was there, they had this product from Japan, and it was called shake fries. Okay, so if you've not heard of the shake fries, and it was wasabi shake fries. So what they do is you get the fresh, crispy, golden French fries, and they give you a wasabi packet and a little paper bag, and you pour the fries in the bag, you pour the packet in, you shake it up, so you've got like seasoned fries. Oh my gosh, that was, the freshman 15 is a real thing at McDonald's, and that was all in fries. So that was my favorite menu item, yeah.
So I have a question for you around when you were onboarding these new users. It looked like even though you're improving the process and you improved it from 10 hours to 12 minutes, it looked like that was still some sort of batch process where the user information or the user identities need to be propagated to multiple systems for it to work. Would you ever consider doing a just-in-time processing for these onboarding use cases?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We actually explored the just-in-time, and what we were finding was we were having some conflicts with some of the refreshes, because those refreshes still take a little bit of time. And so what we were doing was we were dialing back the time until we got a consistent sync across the systems. So we landed, we tried 30 seconds, we tried a minute, we tried 2 minutes, 5 minutes. 10 minutes was really the sweet spot where we didn't have conflicts downstream. So it's absolutely a journey. We're not able to kind of boil the ocean with this. It was that one identity component there, but as we get more upstream systems able to take some of the demand, because that's the other thing too, is if we're pinging the upstream systems, they have to be able to take those connectors that are trying to connect every minute. So that's really kind of the limitation that we had, is some of our upstream systems weren't able to take the volume that was needed to get those like real-time refreshes. So there's other things that are kind of involved. But yeah, we'd love to get to real-time, yeah.
So I have a suggestion first and then a question. When you're talking about the technical aspect of it, and you were talking about how the infrastructure became oversized, you need to alter that slightly. It's supersized. Come on. Next, I can't wait a year, so I'm going to ask now, is part of your solution to the actual business problem changing the way applicants enter their data, having an applicant tracking system, so that all of the tax information and so on is done ahead of time before they arrive at the store, or at least they have the option to do that ahead of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have an applicant tracking system, and that is rolling out to the restaurants. One of the unique things about the McDonald's model is that our franchisees have choices, right? We want to be, we're obviously the supplier of choice, and they have to choose us for the burgers and, the fries and all of those things, but they don't necessarily have to choose us for all of their technology components. And so, that applicant tracking system, when we put it in, we have to show them how it's going to add value to them, if they change to that system versus what they're using today. So sometimes, as we roll it out, that process, that applicant, that ATS is rolling out across, but it's not in all of the franchises yet.
Last comment. So you guys realized you're not in the identity synchronization business. You're in the responsiveness to the business.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Great comment. And I think that's probably the last question that we can take. Yeah.
Yep, that's it. Folks, thank you very much for attending the
you.
session.